Thank you, and welcome to our first edition of the ALMA Leadership Conversations. So the whole initiative is try to create dialogue and engagement around leadership matters that are affecting us as Africa, and definitely beyond Africa. We are looking at all the leadership and management and governance issues that are of pertinence given the current circumstances, historical background, and also looking into the future. So we do hope, as Mr. Chundu has alluded to, we do hope to be holding these conversations every 2 weeks. For the first one, we are privileged to be having one of our own, an ALMA alumni, Dr. Justine Chinoperekweyi, who will be leading the conversations this morning around organizational leadership and development, taking a historical perspective, looking at the current trends, and also looking into the future with regards to organizational leadership and development. And I think you would agree that this, given the current situation that we are currently in with the COVID pandemic, this is a very key topic right now. Many organizations, operations have been disrupted. It's no longer business as usual for many organizations, and it's not going to be business as usual even beyond COVID-19. So many organizations are beginning to think, how then can we continue to survive? How then can we continue to grow in this season and beyond? And that's where organizational leadership and development becomes very key. So we thought it best even to start with this particular conversation this morning in our series with Dr. Justine Chinoperekweyi. Now, Dr. Chinoperekweyi is currently based in Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates. Is the Director of Academics and Programs at the Center for Organizational Leadership and Development in Harare, Zimbabwe. Justine is also the Managing Editor of the Organization Leadership and Development Quarterly. He's also the Director of Chartered Institute of Leadership and Governance in Zimbabwe, and also the Academic Director and Visiting Faculty in various institutions in the United Arab Emirates. Now, Justine is also an author of the following books: Exceptionality Without Relapse, Pathways and Principles to Creating an Exceptional Life, Decision Making for Transformational Presence, Guide to Making Decisions That Work in Corporate Governance in Banking, nuggets from Canada, Yemen, UK, and Zimbabwe. So we definitely have an expert in the field this morning, and we hope to glean as much as we can from his experiences, from his exposures, as we seek to see how best we can ensure that organizations move on beyond COVID-19. So Justine, thank you for agreeing and being willing to lead the conversation this morning. And as we get started, we would want to start with just a brief devotion from Dr. Dotan Moses Jegede, a colleague and a brother in the Lord based in Nigeria. Dr. Dotan is a seasoned academic and practitioner, leadership and management practitioner based in Nigeria. Has worked in different organizations, different levels. So he comes in with a wealth of experience and knowledge, and to be able to tie in all of that, integrating with biblical principles, makes him even a richer reservoir for knowledge, looking at how we can move forward as organizations. So Dr. Dotan, thank you very much for also joining us this morning. If I may give this platform to you to take us through the devotional. Dr. Dotan? Hello, I'm thinking technology is playing on us there. Dr. Dotan?
Your audio is off, Doc.
Hello, good morning, Doctor.
Oh, yes, we can hear you now. Good morning, sir.
How are you, sir?
We are good. So, yes, over to you now.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. I want to thank every single person here present. I want to thank Dr. Shishetu for a good work and for bringing this up at a time like this when we are facing a global disruption across businesses, culture, and the world. I would like to take a brief from the book of Nehemiah, chapters 1 to chapter 7. At a time when Jerusalem was in a big distress, it was a time for intervention, a time for repositioning. And then a man took it upon himself to stand out, to strengthen and rebuild this broken wall of Jerusalem, which is also likely to what we are facing today. And the name of that man was Nehemiah. If you look at chapter 1 to chapter 2, you could see the man called Nehemiah trying to return to Jerusalem because Jerusalem is broken down. And something had to happen. In chapter 1, he had to pray and say, God, this is a situation I find myself in Jerusalem, and I have to do something about it. And in chapter 2, you see this man sending, requesting for the king approval so that he could go back and rebuild the broken wall of Jerusalem. And then chapter 3, what happened? Eventually, this man was able to conclude and complete the building of Jerusalem with the input of other people. It was able to drive them, it was able to lead them, it was able to strengthen them, it was able to propel them, and it was able to bring out the best in them. Of course, in chapter 4, you see a lot of oppositions. Today, too, we could see opposition. It could be economic, it could be political, it could be environmental, it could be social, it could be technology, it could be all diverse of oppositions. But amidst this opposition in chapter 4, which he saw, he didn't give up. He stood out, and he was determined that he was going to mobilize his people to ensure that the wall of Jerusalem was built. In chapter 5. He helped the poor. He helped the people who don't have strength, who don't have energy, who are discouraged, who have lost quite a number of lost resources. And then in chapter 6, another further opposition came, a reinforced opposition, which we could also liken to what we are facing today, that the COVID-19 has disrupted the entire globe. The airline industries, the financial industries, the manufacturing industries, agricultural industries, and all forms of industries across the globe are faced with this global pandemic. And then what happened in chapter 7, in chapter 6, after this experience of further or reinforced opposition, the wall of Jerusalem was finally built. And then you could see the chronicles of people who actually supported in the building of the wall of Jerusalem in chapter 7. The same thing also is what the doctor will be taking us through today. How do we build our organization? How do we strengthen? How do we come up? How do we reinforce so that we can build corporate capabilities, we can build individual competencies, and we can march on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dotan, for that brief but insightful devotion, the learning from the man Nehemiah. Indeed, Nehemiah was quite a reformer. And like you have drawn the parallels between his time and our day, we also have found ourselves in a season where there's so much distress. And a lot of people are faced with so much uncertainty. With the lockdowns happening all over the world, many people have lost their jobs, sources of livelihoods have been affected, the morale, dignity, all of that has been affected. And you've been able to draw that parallel with Israel during that time, and Nehemiah coming to the fore to lead the reformation and the ultimate rebuilding of the Jerusalem wall and rebuilding of Jerusalem as a society. We really thank you. And I think it resonates well with one of our distinctives as ALMA. ALMA, if I may add, stands for Africa Leadership and Management Academy. And we are guided by 4 distinctives as an institution. And one of those distinctives is biblical integration. Where we are saying, let's draw principles from the Bible that are pertinent to leadership practice, to management, and to governance. For we believe that at the heart of the biblical principles it's what has been missing in as far as the leadership discourse is concerned, as far as leadership and management practice is concerned. So that ability to be able to draw principles and parallels from the Bible to leadership and management, that is quite profound. And for us as an institution, that's what we are also pushing for. Sorry. Please, members, can we mute our microphones? Can we please mute our microphones?
Okay, I will do that now. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. Thank you. Yes, so just to continue briefly on who we are as an institution, as ALMA. We are a Christian leadership school based in Harare, Zimbabwe. We offer postgrad degrees. That's an MBA in leadership and management, and then MSc in governance and leadership. I'm sure you can see on the screen there one of our flyers for the 2020 enrollment. We are currently advertising for that. As an organization, we are already thinking of life beyond COVID-19, and we are beginning to strategically also restructure ourselves to see how we can continue to reach out to our target market towards building leaders of integrity. So Dr. Justine, as I've said, is an alumni of ALMA, and is one of the many that we have sent out leading transformation in different spheres. That's why we feel proud to be able to start these conversations with Dr. Justine. He's one who believes in the ethos, and he sees the value in building leaders that are grounded on biblical principles, leaders of integrity, if we are going to move our organizations beyond what we are currently going through. So that's on ALMA. We are currently having students that are enrolled for our programs also being part of this webinar. We're having students that are doing their governance degree and also the MBA degree. We are also having members of our alumni body, other alumni members, also being part of this webinar. And we're also pleased to share that we are having many other members, colleagues in the field of organizational leadership and development, in the field of higher education, joining in from Nigeria. We are having colleagues joining from Afghanistan, guys joining in from United Arab Emirates. So we are having more or less all regions being represented, and we are hoping to draw as much wealth as we can from all those resources as we get to be interacting with Dr. Justine. Now, just a brief highlight of how the program is going to be. We are now about to move into the main presentation with Dr. Justine Chinoperekweyi. So you'll be given opportunity as he presents for questions, for comments, for people to come in and also make contributions. But we'll also then create a time for question and answer right at the end of the presentation. So even if you do not get the opportunity to ask your question as he's going through the presentation, we can send in through the chat room. We can also then create that opportunity at the end of the webinar, right after his presentation, for question and answer, and we get to interact more around what you would have shared. All right, so Dr. Justine?
Yes.
Yes, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much to ALMA for this wonderful opportunity for us to get into conversations regarding this particular subject of organization leadership and development. And I also thank everyone who took their time to get into this conversation this morning. As Dr. Chichetu has rightfully indicated, we want to get into a dialogue and engage in conversations that are transformational going forward. We are faced with organizations that are in chaos, organizations that are grappling with complexity issues, and the business environment, as it is normally being described, is termed to be a VUCA environment. And in this particular environment, there is no one solution that we can say we are going to adapt and implement in our organizations and get sustainable results. For us to be able to move forward as a community, for us to be able to move forward as organizations, we need to engage in conversations. And this is the structure that we are going to adopt this morning, for us to get into conversations around these two concepts and see how we can move forward as organizations and as a people. So Dr. Chichetu has already introduced me in terms of me being an alumni of ALMA and working towards bringing sustainable solutions to organizations and bringing sustainable solutions to families and to individuals through embedding values and principles that foster progress. And the field of organizational leadership and development has those fundamental principles that we can utilize in our organizations, fundamental principles that we can utilize in our families, and fundamental principles that we can use at individual level in order to ensure our societies move forward. So the conversation that we are going to be having today is looking at how do we then blend together these two concepts and bring sustainable results to organizations and to our societies. I've written 4 books, and Dr. Chichetu has indicated that. One of the books is on organization development review, which covers much of what we are going to be discussing today in the context of leadership and leading organizations into the future. I've also written numerous articles which deal with this particular subject of organization leadership, organizational leadership, and organization development. The whole essence of these publications being to advance the science, the theory, the practices, and values of these particular concepts. So we want to get into a conversation which looks at how we are going to integrate or blend or mix these two concepts in a way that moves our societies forward. And we have people here representing from different backgrounds. And I will ask you to go into the chat box and just mention your name and the perspectives that you are bringing to this conversation and where you are joining us from. So if it's Justin who is going to write in the chat box, I would say I'm Justine Chinoperekweyi, bringing organization development from Abu Dhabi. So we want to see who are the people who are representing us here, and it will help as well for Dr. Chichetu to monitor the questions and for us to get into conversations. So just take a minute and get into the chat box, write your name, the perspective or your field, and where you're joining us from this morning, as I proceed with this particular conversation and also admit others into this meeting. So these are some of the articles that I have written, and they speak into organizational leadership or organization leadership, and also the issue of educational management and educational leadership, because knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer is fundamental to the principles that we are going to be discussing this morning. So to start this conversation, we have 2 concepts that we are going to be looking at. One is the issue of organization leadership, or in this particular context, organizational leadership. And the other is the organization development. And due to a lot of evolutions and revolutions that we see in leadership, in management, and in organization development, we have seen these fields being mixed and matched in various ways. There are a lot of manifestations that end up confusing those who practice these particular fields. So I'm going to be facilitating this conversation, number one, from an exclusionary perspective, where we need to look at each field as a standalone field. So we are going to discuss organization leadership on its own, and we are also going to discuss organization development on its own. And then we are going to look at these principles from a cumulative perspective, how they each support one another, and then a complementary perspective to see how we then get to a position where we blend these 2 concepts. So in various disciplines of study, we see a lot of mix and match of concepts. In organizations, we also see a lot of mix and match of different concepts. And the whole essence of that is to derive value in terms of how these concepts are going to be merged. So concepts can be looked at as standalone concepts, or we can look at them from a cumulative perspective or from a complementary perspective. And in the context of the ALMA program, we are going to look at these concepts from a cumulative and complementary perspective in terms of how we then get to have these two concepts joined together. So we have organizational leadership and organizational development, and key to that is what is the view of OD when they look at organizational leadership. When those people who are involved in organization development view leadership, what do they think about? And I look at this point from the time when organization development was introduced in the 1940s, and people were saying there is a problem in leadership. And if you ask people who are involved in executive coaching and leadership development, they will say there are issues in leadership that organization development has to resolve. And the final answer to that is that the people in OD said, to solve the leadership problems, we need to do inquiry and engagement. We can't go into organizations and say, we are the experts. We know your problems, technical and adaptive challenges, and we are going to solve these problems. The solution to leadership issues from an OD perspective is inquiry and engagement. Without inquiry and engagement, we will not solve problems sustainably. And we also have leadership looking at OD. A new field is being introduced. People who are saying we are bringing whole system thinking perspectives, and leadership is not performing to standard. And leadership said, we need to engage. The solution for us to work together is through inquiry and engagement. So when OD looks at leadership, they say inquiry and engagement. And when those in leadership look at OD, they also say inquiry and engagement. So when we bring these two fields together, they are being brought together through inquiry and engagement. So whatever concept, whatever model that we are going to develop in organizational leadership, whatever model that we are going to develop in organization development, if it is not embedded in inquiry and engagement, that model is not going to be sustainable. We have certain leaders today in organizations who shun inquiry and engagement and believe that they are experts, and they try to work their way through organizations, and eventually the organizations fail. We have certain organization development consultants who say, I have been doing consulting work for the past 20 years. I have consulted in multinational organizations. I am an expert. And they just walk into Coca-Cola Zimbabwe and say, here I am. I'm going to solve your problems. And they try to bring in tools and models that they have been using before, and eventually they fail. So the blending of two concepts that we have today is founded on inquiry and engagement. It is founded on conversations. Effective leadership requires participatory approaches. It requires us to engage people. It requires us not to see ourselves as experts, but rather to be part of a community and build models that are sustainable. So when we have people in organizations who view themselves as experts, we are most likely going to fail if there are no participatory approaches. And this brings into play the recent definition of the purpose of the corporation by the United States Roundtable, where they say the purpose of the corporation is to serve all stakeholders. And this can only happen through engagement and inquiry. So the question that I will pose to us and for us to reflect on ourselves is, to what extent are we inquiring and engaging in our leadership activities? And this is leadership at personal level, at family level, or at organizational level. To what extent do we inquire? To what extent do we engage others to find lasting solutions? to the problems that we have. So the fundamental principle that we have from organizational leadership and organization development is that of inquiry and engagement. And this is the whole reason why OD was introduced in the 1940s to address the challenges that were there in management if we are to review scientific management principles, the behavioral theories, and the administrative theories that were happening prior to 1940. And I'm going to be talking about that in the next slides. So inquiry and engagement is fundamental to everything that we do in leadership and in organization development. And I will ask for a comment. Dr. Chichetu, you can pick anyone to comment on their view on inquiry and engagement being central to leadership and OD. I think I'll start with Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura is taught me transformational leadership. And Dr. Laura, if you can start the conversation on the significance of inquiry and engagement in leadership and organization development.
Dr. Justine.
Yes.
I hope we are not using this as payback time to Dr. Laura. Eh?
Not really. not really. She's someone I learned from.
Yes, Dr. Laura.
Okay, very interesting and a very good approach to leadership, organizational leadership and development. The thought that's coming to my mind is that a lot of times when we are consultants or have a service, we can tend to be very inward focused and not outward focused. We are not looking at what the needs are of the people that we want to serve. And so I think this puts us in a good direction to be able to say, let's not be too impressed with ourselves. It's good that we have certain competencies, but when we think about whatever we are doing as being outcome based and not competence based or outcome focused and not competence focused, then this approach of having both inquiry and engagement begins to make sense. So thank you very much for starting us on this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. Dr. Chichetu, you can pick one
Yes.
more before I proceed. Inquiry and engagement being fundamental to conversations that we should have in leadership and conversations that we should have in organization development.
Thank you. Let me have Rumbi Mchenje. Hi, Rumbi.
Hi, I'm here.
Yes, I know. I can see you work with the young people. The whole
Yes.
concept of inquiry and engagement being central to organizational leadership and development. What's your take on that?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Chichetu, and thank you, Dr. Justine, for starting us off. I think for me, I work with young people, but as I was listening to you, I thought of it, what you were saying about it being fundamental on a family level. And I've noticed it also, like with my family, we've got sessions where we sit down and as a family, we talk about what's happening and the progress that we want to make in projects that we are doing. And also just getting inquiry, like it's my dad who starts with it and also just involves the whole family in terms of my brothers and myself, just to hear their thoughts in terms of, okay, this is what I've decided to do. So how do you think we should go about it? And because of that, I've seen how this is strengthening the family and also just bringing out confidence in each one of us in the family. And this is something I think I've also been learning as I've been working with the young people and the volunteers I work with as we do leadership trainings. to also say, with every class that we start with, let's start with asking the young people, so at what level are you at? You know, we want to be able to start from there so that we're not just coming with this program and just place it on you, but being able to say, okay, you're at this level. So let us be able to see how we can be able to work together to move along. So being able to inquire and being able to get their feedback is very, very important. So thank you so much for starting us on that.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So inquiry and engagement, the reason why I brought that, I'm going to be talking about the timeline at which we saw organization development being introduced to complement or support organization leadership and management. Leadership and management has been there from the time of Frederick Taylor, the scientific management. We had the issues of Henry Fayol, who brought in the administrative management. And at that point in time, organization development was not being discussed. So we see a field that was coming into play to support organizational leadership and management. So things have their roots and branches. Affairs have their beginnings and ends. To know what is first and what is last will lead one near the way. And this is the Confucian classic from the Great Learning. And we also have the Taoist philosophy where they say the Tao produced the one produced the two produced the three, and the three produced the 10,000 things. And what that means to us is that everything has its own beginnings, and we can't ignore the early beginnings of any concept. We can't ignore the early beginnings of any field of study. We see a lot of manifestations in terms of organizational leadership. Today, if Dr. Justine does a PhD, he wants to do a certain model just to validate my PhD. If someone is studying leadership today, they want to develop a model and say, these are the 7 P's of leadership. And the next person will come and say, these are the 7 S of leadership. So we have a lot of manifestations in leadership and the way organizations should be run. And it's becoming so confusing because some of these manifestations that we see have no scientific relevance. They are not validated in any way, but I'm lying on my bed and I want to write an article for social media. And I say, today I'm going to write about the 7 P's of leadership. And then there it is on social media and people adopt that. So we see a lot of manifestations in the way organizations should be led to such an extent that it's becoming confusing in terms of how should organizations should be run. So we need to get back to the basics and say, what are the early beginnings and where are we today? What is the first one that produced the two that produced the 3, and the 3 that produced the many manifestations we see today? For you to understand Dr. Justine, you need to go back to Zimbabwe, Kutanda, Kwarusape, where Justine grew up. Then you would really understand why does Justine act the way he does. If you just look at Dr. Justine in Abu Dhabi and you think you know Dr. Justine, you'll be lying to yourself. For us to understand ALMA, we need to go back to the fundamental philosophies and the concepts that led to ALMA. What led to ALMA being established as Africa Leadership and Management Academy? Then you will be able to understand ALMA. So everything has its own early beginnings, and we need to go back to the early beginnings and be able to understand where we are today. When we are teaching leadership, we need to go back to where leadership started. When people were saying leaders are born and they are not meant. And then different models start being developed to be where we are today. So we are going to look at some of those historical backgrounds of organizational leadership and organization development and see how they are now blended together. For us to understand a fruit in any tree, we need to understand the roots. It doesn't necessarily that because the trees are planted in the same gardens, in the same garden, they are going to produce the same fruit in terms of how the fruits taste. So understanding the roots, the early beginnings of any field will help us moving forward. Today, we have a lot of people in learning and development. It is now an industry where people just want to make money and they just come to your organization and say, Mr. Hassan Tawakoli, you are working in Afghanistan. I can do learning and development and train your staff. On what basis? On the basis that it's a money-making machine. But if we embed our training programs, if we embed our understanding of leadership and organization development on the early beginnings, I'm a student of ALMA, and whatever ALMA taught was embedded in biblical integration, because that is the foundation, that is the early beginnings of the program. So the early beginnings help us understand where we are going as organizations. So when we look at organizational leadership, we need to look at organizational leadership from self, family and friends, teams and organization, and then to society. We have a lot of people who work in organizations at organizational leadership level, and yet they fail at self and family level. So as the previous speaker, Rumbi, has indicated, the principles that we learn at self-leadership are essential at family leadership and are essential at organizational leadership. So we can't talk of organizational leadership without going back to self and family leadership. Dr. Chicheto.
Yes, Doc, just sorry to interrupt you. Please, may I kindly remind participants once again to mute your microphones? May we please all mute our microphones? Thank you, Doc. You can continue.
Thank you. So for us to understand organizational leadership, we need to understand self-leadership and family leadership. For us to understand or have effective leadership at society level, we need to have people who are effective at self, family, and organizational level. And the question I will pose at this moment in time is, what is the difference between leadership across these levels? And I will pick one, and Dr. Chicheto will pick the second person. And I see Maureen Omeibe on the screen. Maureen, what is the difference in terms of leadership across these 4 levels? Yes, Maureen.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. Like Dr. Justine have mentioned, my name is Maureen Omeibe. Management professional and a knowledge transfer expert in women enterprise, public leadership, and business organizations. Dr. Justine, I thank you very much for making it possible for us to have this very meaningful conversation. And I also want to thank Dr. Jegede for inviting me to this meeting. This is the time for us to actually engage in this kind of conversation because it's a very difficult time. And it's a time that we will begin to seek for so many things for us to be able to survive at individual levels, at family levels, at organizational level. And I'm glad I'm here. So Dr. Justine, back to your question. You were asking the differences between levels of leadership across families, organizations, and what again? I didn't get the question very well. I would like to.
What is the difference? What is the difference in terms of leadership at self, family, organizational, and society level? Is it the same? Can we lead the same way across these 4 levels?
Well, from my perspectives and from experience, I think we cannot lead the same way. Because for every leadership setting, there is a purpose and there are objectives. And it's very, very important we connect to the purpose of leadership for us to be able to identify how we'll be able to lead in that space and be able to achieve specific objectives. The common problems in your family, because from my perspective, I see leadership as an opportunity given to any individual to interact with problems and proffer sustainable solutions to those problems, inspiring and influencing other people to do the same. So if I'm living in my family, if I'm leading in my family, the first thing I need to look at is what is it that my family is all about? What is it that my family needs? What kind of experience do I want my family members, people that I'm leading, to have? That is the question to ask. At the community level, you look at the complexities of the community, you look at the components, and you look at the basic needs of the people and the kind of transformation that you might want to bring in. And at the federal level, or what I may call this national level, it is also important we look at the nitty-gritty, the complexities, the components, the difficult spot, I would call it difficult spots of your leadership. So I will say that it is not the same.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I will cut you there. Thank you. Thank you. So, leadership, again, can we please, can we mute our microphones, please? Leadership varies or changes as one moves. Excuse me, can we please mute our microphones? Okay. Excuse me, please, can you mute our microphones? Microphones, please.
Hello, Dr. Justine?
Yes.
Maybe best that you mute from your end centrally for everyone, then unmute whoever you'll be wanting to speak. Yes.
I'll try to do that, mute all. All right, thank you. So leadership varies at each level, and the dynamics of leadership changes when we move from self, family to organizational level. At self and family level, we have the interpersonal dynamic of leadership, where you have to relate to the people that you know and you can reason together. But when we go to organizational level, complexity, which Ms. Maureen has just indicated, starts chipping in, where we now have to bring in systems, structures, and processes in place. And most people are effective when we deal at self and family leadership. And if we go into a lot of training, organizational leadership training, we focus more on the leadership skills and competencies and styles of leadership. And people are so eloquent when they are talking about leadership. And it's interesting to listen to a YouTube presentation on leadership. When you listen to this conversation, you will say, it's easy, I can do it. Why? Because you just need to be a good person for you to be a good leader from the way it is portrayed in a lot of our organizational leadership discussions. If I go to a grade 3 classroom and ask the class leader in that classroom to say, what does a good leader look like? A grade 3 student can tell me exactly what a good leader looks like. And everyone would then say, it's easy to become a leader. But now we go into organizations, this person who speaks so much about leadership, Dr. Justine was speaking about organizational leadership on ALMA webinar, but you go to his organization, Dr. Justine is failing. Why? Because there are certain complexities that come with organizational leadership as we try to bring alignment to organizations. Going back to scientific management era, the Frederick Taylor time, where people were viewed as machines. And I tell you, if we go into a lot of organizations today, people are viewed as machines. Yet we have people who speak about organizational leadership eloquently. You see their Facebook posts, social media posts, they speak well about leadership. But in their organizations, the results are different. So organizational leadership has that complexity that comes with systems, with structures, with rewards and processes. There is something that is basic to say when people are working for you in an organization, there has to be equality in terms of compensation. And people in human resource management talk about that everywhere, equality and equal opportunity. But if we go into organizations, we don't see equality and equal opportunities. And these are the aspects of organizational leadership that we don't talk about when we are conducting our leadership trainings. We only focus on what are the styles of leadership, and we look at the style of leadership that is common those days. And today we can now have what we call the COVID-19 leadership style. And people just hammer on that leadership style. And still organizations fold. So the dynamics of leadership changes when we go to organizations. You might be so good at your family level or when you are with your friends, but complexity chips in when you go to the team and organizations. What we want to see in organizational leadership are leaders who elevate strengths of people. You have a person working under you, we need to elevate their strengths. We need to multiply people's strengths. We need to make sure that people's strengths magnify or refract into societies. That's how we become effective in terms of organizational leadership. We work in organizations where if I am so good in my job, my manager doesn't want to leave me. He or she wants me to stay. And that's what in human resource they call talent hoarding. Just because Dr. Chichetu is so good in administration, let him stay on that desk and be an administrator for the next 20 years. Just because this employee is good in terms of customer service, let this employee stay at the customer desk for the next 20 years. And we have people leading this kind of employees, and they refer to themselves as good organizational leaders. But in organizational leadership, we need to see the elevation of strengths, identify people's strengths, and make sure those strengths are magnified, they are multiplied, and bring those strengths into society. We have a lot of people who have skills in our organizations, yet they are locked down in certain cubicles in organizations by people who call themselves organizational leaders. Dr. Chichetu, your hand is up.
Yes, Doc, I think that was from before.
Okay, then, thank you.
Yes.
So organizational leadership looks at situations where we need to elevate people's strengths, we need to multiply people's strengths and bring people's strengths into societies. We do no good to society if we just lock people in our cubicles. And this is what was happening during the time of Frederick Taylor, scientific management principles. This is what was happening during the administrative era of the 1920s, during the time of Henry Fayol. But now we had a field of organization development which came in to say we need to bring into organizations the behavioral sciences of leadership and support what we see in leadership and in management. And the behavioral sciences then get embedded in humanistic values. The behavioral sciences then said we need democratic values. And it said we need social values in organizations. And when we have these conversations in leadership, these are exciting conversations, which everyone wants to listen to that YouTube post, because you are talking of something that speaks into people's lives. But the application part is what we are failing in most organizations. The application of democratic values, the application of social values and humanitarian values is what is missing in most of our leadership. Though we can speak eloquently about leadership from a democratic, leadership from a social and humanitarian perspective. So in organizational leadership, we need to move away from the TFW virus, which I'm going to talk about later, which is the Taylorism, Fayolism, and Weberism virus in organizations, where we believe people are machines. We look unto ourselves. We believe so much in policies, rules, and regulations, so much such that we ignore human potential. We are so much tied to say people have to be in office from 8 to 5 and doing what? Just posting stuff on their machines just because he or she is a clerk, but there is no potential being realized. People work 9 to 5 to such an extent that some people saying work doesn't help. Why? Because they're being locked in cubicles, doing nothing that brings human potential. And this makes us even worse than what Frederick Taylor and the scientific management theory was advocating for in the 1914s. So leadership should see us elevate people's strengths, multiply people's strengths, bring human strengths to society. And this is where we see organization development complementing our leadership models and our leadership styles. I will ask for one perspective or contribution, Dr. Chichetu, on that before I proceed.
Yes, thank you, Doc. I think that is very pertinent, the issue of talent alignment. But contrary to maybe the example that you gave where one is being kept in the cubicle, as you put it, I think there's also that danger where we elevate people to their detriment. Like take for instance, in our context, a maths teacher that is doing very well at high school, his class always 100% pass rate at A level, then as a reward system for their good performance as a teacher, we elevate them to being the headmaster. And yes. But this guy is no administrator. But the reward system is no other way of rewarding his high performance in the position that he's very good at. So in the end, we kill him as a teacher, we put him in an administrative role, and he destroys the school. We have also lost the high grades in terms of the maths results. So maybe if we can, hopefully you speak into that later, how we can then marry the two, talent alignment and the reward systems.
Okay, I'll bring you back to inquiry and engagement.
Yes.
Whatever we do in leadership, whatever we do in organization development should come from a point of inquiry and engagement, dialogue and conversations. So before we give this maths teacher a new role, there has to be inquiry and engagement. Once we do that inquiry, and you can then use the different metrics that the tools that are used in human resource management to say, is this person fit to become a headmaster? But the most basic thing is it has to be based on inquiry and engagement. But what we see in organizations is the maths teacher is promoted on the basis of his relationship to those who have superior positions. There is no inquiry, there is no engagement. And this is what was happening during the time of Frederick Taylor, the scientific management era. People were just being promoted just because they are friends. We start talking of nepotism in workplaces. These are the issues that are coming because there is no inquiry, there is no engagement.
Well,
I think I saw some hands up as well.
Yes, we are having Chabani. Chabani's hand has been up for a while. Chabani, can you come in? Chaban? Maybe we can check Dr. Stolle in the meanwhile.
Okay.
Dr. Stolle?
Thank you, Dr. Chet. Dr. Justine, welcome.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Yes, so I just wanted to add to the aspect of multiplying strengths, that one of the challenges that I've seen is that while one can be elevated to the next level, there's normally not enough preparation to fill the gap of this incumbent before he or she is elevated. So that coaching and mentoring to say, you know what, we in next year or in 12 months or in 6 months, we're going to put you in the next position. So we need to groom someone in this current position so that there will be no vacuum. I always see that as we elevate one, we create a vacuum. And that is quite a challenge which will lead into organizational incapacitation in terms of human resources. The other thing that you have already mentioned was the issue of saying, if we want to elevate this person to the next level or to this other position, is that the career pathway of the person? Have we engaged the person sufficiently? Because we might actually be thinking that we're doing good for the person, and yet we're actually, leading the person astray, because each one of us are uniquely gifted and we've got our own calling, unique callings. So that engagement you started with earlier on to say we need to continuously engage. So I think that is quite fundamental. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Do you think we can take one more? We can try Taban again?
If it's around, yes, then we'll move on.
Taban? I think we can move on.
Okay,
Doc.
so Dr. Stoller is bringing the issue of coaching and mentorship. And I was going to come to that through what we then say in OD, interventions. And interventions, these interventions were not there when the early leadership models were being developed and practiced. When we go to Taylor's scientific management, when we go to administrative, the 14 principles from Fayol, and when we go to Weber's principles in the 1930s, there was no talk of career development. There was no talk of coaching and mentorship. There was nothing about leadership or executive coaching. So OD then said, there is a problem in organizational leadership. And going back to that first slide, which speaks into inquiry and engagement, OD then said, let's engage them. Let's engage these organizational leaders and let's find a solution, an intervention to address these particular issues. And the people in leadership initially were resistant because it was an attack on leadership, where these guys are saying there is a problem in organizational leadership. Leadership initially said, no, we are okay. People are machines. People have to follow rules and regulations. What is laid down is what has to be done. You can't divert from what is laid down. Until those in leadership said, let's inquire and engage. And today we see a lot of CEOs, they will tell you that I have a coach, but they are CEOs. I have a colleague in Switzerland, Ms. Nicole Heyman, she's into leadership and executive coaching. There are a lot of guys in Zimbabwe who are doing leadership and executive coaching, and the leaders now are willing to sit down and learn. Why? Because of understanding those interventions that help organizational leadership to lead us into what we're looking at. So when we now look at organizational leadership, it should be contrasted with unit leadership, which focuses on the performance of an organizational unit. If we go into organizations today and we meet a marketing manager, most of these marketing managers, they only lead in the context of their departments. They don't know what is happening in finance. They are not interested in what is happening in production. They are only focusing on their unit, and they are experts in marketing. And if we go deeper into looking at what are they doing as marketing managers, we see that they are doing something that their subordinates can do. And in the end, they're just holding a position as a marketing manager. Yet they are not engaging in organizational leadership tasks that looks at an organization as a whole, systems thinking. in their way of working. So many senior leaders in organizations are unclear about the scope of organizational leadership. When I am appointed to be the head of department, I enjoy leadership as a position. If we are going to go to John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, I just am interested in becoming a leader in an organization, but I'm not performing organizational leadership roles. All I do is monitor the attendance of my staff, people in the organization. All I do is just receiving instructions from the CEO and implement without questioning. And most of these people we then term organizational leaders are just sycophants of the CEO. They just listen to what the CEO says and do that without questioning. But in the context of organizational leadership, we need to see these heads of department looking at organization from a systems perspective. Though I am a marketing manager, I have a role to play in finance. I have a role to play in production. And we need to have conversations around this organization as a system. So there are numerous forces which pull leaders' attention away from organizational leadership roles and provide them with every incentive to focus on their unit leadership role. In most organizations, people forget about systems thinking and say, you know what, I'm a marketing manager. I'm just going to do my marketing tasks. What happens in finance, it's none of my business. I work with universities and then I will say, you know what, I am teaching a module on finance for managers. I don't care what the other guy is teaching when they are teaching human resource management. And in the end, I start teaching finance in silo without integrating finance with human resource management. And we see organizational leaders working in finance, they know nothing about what is happening in production. All they care about is producing financial statements. All they care about is cost. People in human resource management, all they care about is cutting costs without considering the organization as a system. So when we talk of organizational leaders, we are looking at individuals who have that whole system thinking perspective and say, I am a finance manager, but I have conversations with people in marketing. I have conversations with people in production and logistics, and we are trying to move this organization together. It's more like looking at the human body. If we have the hand say, I don't care about the eye, whatever happens to the eye is none of my business, then the body is in crisis. But these are the situations we see in organizations today. And then we say the organization is not performing, we are incapacitated, and we start looking outside to blame the macro environmental forces without looking inward first in terms of how we are running the organizations inside. So there are a number of forces that pull people or senior leaders away from that whole system thinking and focus only on their unit. And Dr. Chichetu, we can get 2 people to share some of those factors that leads people to only focus on their unit performance.
Yes, thank you, Doc. Maybe before I choose one, just to comment briefly on that. It's unfortunate that is quite prevalent in organizations, the silo mentality, where we are having departmental leaders focusing more on the welfare of their respective departments. And unfortunately, just maybe as a possible reason for this, could it be a limitation of resources, where we then tend to have departments on a scramble for limited resources within the organization? I'm just posing that as a possible.
I'll come to that.
Yes.
I'll come to that.
Then maybe if we can also, Chief Mambo, Mr. Chundu. Mr. Chundu.
Oh, Doc.
Yes, maybe we can come in as well. Dr. Justine has just asked what could be the likely factors that lead to having silo mentality within organizations rather than systems thinking as an organization, and departments are more focused on their respective department and not wanting to collaborate as departments of the same organization.
I'll just speak to one aspect. that I've come across in managing turnaround. I think everything goes back to the overall leader, the CEO or the MD. That's where the culture starts from. The way the units function, to a large extent, is a function of how they are configured, the quality of leadership that is coming from the top. So yes, they may be doing well in their individual units, but for them to become a whole, someone got to be in charge of that, and it goes back to the quality of the ultimate leader in that setup.
Thank you. I saw Maureen's hand just briefly, and maybe there's one more. Your audio, your mic is off, Maureen. Right, I think we lost her, Dr. Chichetu.
So maybe we can have Paul Mapasure. Paul?
I think
okay,
my
she's there.
Maureen is on now. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much. So that question you asked Dr. Justine, from my point of view, I think most of the reasons why some people are just focused purely on the areas of their responsibilities in organization. The number one is they have limited knowledge on organizational leadership. If you are focused just only in your areas of expertise in an organization, there will be a tendency for you to think that that is the most important thing that you will have to be dealing with in whatever position that you are in. So what I will say is, when you are leading a team in an organization, you have to accept vulnerability and understand that you have to continue to seek for the right knowledge or for the right body of information to allow you to lead in excellence. Because the fact remains that whatever you must have studied in school, there is a high tendency that what you will see in practice is not in tandem with what you have studied. So some organizational leaders, they have limited knowledge. Some of them who may want to may find it difficult, except they go for additional training. Then the second one is this. Some people, particularly in Africa, organizational leaders in Africa, they are position-oriented leaders. They are not really leaders who have it deep in their mind to develop other people's career or to influence productivity in the life of other people. Being self-centered, being selfish, being unable to identify that another person has a talent, qualification, or expertise that may even be better than yours. If you lose that focus on understanding the inputs that other people are making, that is what leads them to detach themselves from other departments and just focus on the little place where they have been given responsibilities. But any leader that have that view of impacting people around him, you will always see them having, eagerness, willingness, and passion to know what is happening in other departments. And I'm speaking from experience.
Thank you for that. So the issue of knowledge, the issue of the leader themselves and resources in organizations leading this particular mentality in most leaders. The issue of resources, Dr. Chichetu, scarcity of resources will always be there in organizations. And there is always that possibility of departments fighting for resources. Finance says we are cutting costs. Marketing says, no, we need to do a lot of advertisements. And human resources saying, no, we are not going to increase salaries. And the people in production are saying, no, but our people are working 12 hours now because we have increased demand. That conflict is always there. but we need interventions that will help in terms of addressing those particular resource limitations. And it comes when we start having those conversations in organizations. I saw there's Gumede's hand is up. Before I give, I have my mentee here, Princess Raila Hernandez. She's from Philippines, and she's going to talk about some of the interventions that we can use in organizations in order to address some of these issues. And she's also going to give, I think, a case study from Ghana, where some of those interventions were used. So, Raila, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so Raila is my mentee. She's, we believe in leadership and mentorship from a practical point of view. She was once in touch with Dr. Laura in terms of issues of leadership. And she's going to talk about some of the interventions that leaders can use in order to drive organizational leadership. So I'll give Raila the next 3 to 4 minutes to take us through those interventions. Yes, Raila.
Okay, hello, good morning. Once again, my name is Princess Raila Hernandez, a student of Dr. Justin, and I will be discussing the organizational development tools and techniques and how it is being used. So first we have brainstorming. It is a group critical thinking strategy that includes the unconstrained commitment of creative thoughts. It is a casual way to deal with problem solving with lateral reasoning, which is a strategy for growing new ideas to take care of issue by taking a gander at them in a creative manner. Second we have is process consultation. It is utilized to assess work groups and their viabilities. This is done by perception of a specialist or consultant who supplies input and feedbacks of the impact and effect of individuals and cooperating in a group. Next, we have quality circle. It is a support that executive uses to oversee and improve the quality of the whole association or the organization. The intensity of quality circle originated from common trust amongst leaders and members, which prompts increasingly shared comprehension. Fourth, we have training needs analysis. It is a procedure that an organization experiences so as to decide all the training that needs to be finished in a specific period of time to permit and allow their group to finish their activities as successfully as could be expected under all circumstances. Fifth, we have organizational capacity. It is the capabilities, asset, or information that is expected to run an effective organization. It is critical to have a clear mission statement to guarantee that every member is right on track. Sixth, we have knowledge management. It is the conscious procedure of characterizing, organizing, retaining, and sharing the knowledge and experience of workers inside an organization. The primary objective of knowledge management is to improve an association's productivity and spare knowledge inside the organization. Seventh, we have creative thinking. It is an approach to take a gander at and tackle an issue from an alternative point of view, staying away from tradition, arrangement, and thinking fresh. This creative procedure permits you to explore new ideas and address new difficulties and look for ways that are unique and new. Lastly, we have coaching and mentoring. Coaching is a procedure of empowering singular learning and improvement, so execution and aptitude are upgraded, while mentoring is a procedure of individuals, improving individuals' information, work productivity, and perspective. It is additionally about amplifying the person's capacity. So as an example, I will be using a case study done in Ghana entitled Navrongo Community Health and Family Planning on how OD is being performed. Just a brief introduction of or overview of what the case study is. In 1994, a primary health care program was initiated in Navrongo in Ghana in order to meet the healthcare needs of the people. The project began by identifying and evaluating the impact of underused local and organizational resources for healthcare. An example of brainstorming that they did in the case study is that they created a focus group discussion involving all stakeholders to generate data on participation perception of local community members. They also demonstrated process consultation. in a way that the data generated was used to design the operations of the Navrango Community Health and Family Planning Project with active involvement of traditional leaders. Community leaders were also tasked to monitor activities so as to ensure full participation and ownership of all key stakeholders, which is an example of quality circle. We also have an example of training needs analysis, where the nurses were retained, renamed, and certified as community health officers to serve as residents' healthcare providers. And lastly, in 1998, the Navrango Health Delivery System was declared a model for community-based healthcare. That is why community officers, or the nurses, serve as trainers, while the team from Nakwanta watch and listen to their counterpart in Navrango in their daily health and service delivery activities. That is all. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Raila, for that. So Raila has taken us through 8 tools and techniques that organizational leaders can then use to address these particular issues, where organizational leaders are forced to just focus on their unit performance areas. And we need to have brainstorming sessions. We need to have process consultation, quality circles or radical circles, where people sit around and deliberate on issues pertinent to the organization as a whole. We need to have training needs analysis. When you are then doing training activities in our organizations and going through leadership and executive coaching, organizational capacity assessment, knowledge management, creative critical thinking, and coaching and mentorship, which was discussed earlier. And you can read through the Navrongo family planning, community health and family planning case study in Ghana, which is in Eastern region of Ghana, where this was practiced and it yielded positive results in Ghana in that respect. Do we have hands up, Dr. Chichetu, before I proceed?
Yes, Maureen, you'd want to comment?
Yeah, thank you very much. The young lady that took us through this several keys. I want to ask Dr. Justine or the young lady a little bit more about organizational capacity. I didn't get it well. How do we utilize organizational or deploy organizational? I don't know if it's organizational capacity. I just want to get more clarity on organizational capacity.
Organizational capacity assessment. Raila, are you there?
Yes.
Yes. Organizational capacity assessment. Then I'll take it further.
Okay, so when you know the organizational capacity is knowing the capabilities and assets of a person. So once that you know how or what's the strength and weaknesses of a certain person, you could easily see how productivity or how productive a person could be. With this, you could have an effective association and performance of a whole. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we're looking at organizational capacity assessment, and we are saying, does the organization have the capacity to go into a certain direction? And this is capacity in terms of the resources. Dr. Chichetu indicated that at times we don't have enough resources. So when you do a capacity assessment, we are saying, do we have enough resources, financial, human, time, all sorts of resources that can support this particular intervention before we implement? We have certain organizations that push people into certain projects, and midway through the project, they realize that they don't have enough resources. Why? Because there were errors in their capacity assessment to determine how to move forward. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So I have a sample here of a job description that speaks into organizational leadership. What are some of the roles of people who are engaged in organizational leadership? And a question which I think was addressed by Mr. Chundu, where how can CEOs encourage or support top management in undertaking organizational leadership roles or participating in strategic decisions? And Dr. Chundu touched on that question, and I will ask just one person to respond to that briefly. Dr. Chichetu, just briefly from one person. How can CEOs encourage organizational leaders to have a holistic mindset?
Thank you. Dr. Jotam? Dr. Jotam?
Yes, sir. I'm
Yes,
listening.
you can respond to that one.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, as we could see today, that quite a number of businesses are towering down and they are not able to optimize their capacity. As I've always said, if you look through most of the corporations in Africa, that's why we find so many of our businesses, they're not on the Fortune 100, on the Fortune 500, because they have not even been able to survive a century. And why many of them still doing it within their first 25 years of existence, 30 years, 40 years. So the future is also bright because of absence of organizational development. Now, for CEOs, particularly today, we find so many people enrolling themselves into CEOs position, even though they themselves don't even have the capacity to even lead organizations. Maybe as a owner or as a founder, they say, I'm a CEO. Yes, you could be a CEO by title, but whether you have what it takes to lead, to govern, and whether you have the full circles of what it entails to manage an industry or a business, this has also been another issue. Now, but for growing organizations, what can the CEOs do if they truly want to support corporate capabilities, growth, expansion, and fulfillment of stakeholders' expectations? One, CEOs themselves must submit themselves to learning. Just as Dr. rightly said earlier, that today you have executive coaching. Because in my own interactions with several CEOs and consultations, like what I even had with a CEO yesterday, you could see some CEOs holding information from their line managers saying, I don't want it to be aware of this, I don't want it to know this. So CEOs themselves must first submit themselves to learning, understanding what it means to manage in the 21st century, understanding some of the concepts of OD. For example, if the CEOs don't even know what all this means, how would they also prosecute, and how would they also I also think that CEOs have to adopt some of these processes or interventions highlighted. In most cases, and from my own experience, CEOs tell you they don't have time to gather for brainstorming, and then the executive director should handle that one, HR should handle that one. So, but going forward, CEOs should also create time to be involved in brainstorming, and during the brainstorming sessions, CEOs should be humble enough to accept the shortcomings and allow people to have a forum, an open opportunity, an environment that allows them to hear their views. We have carried out a lot of employee opinion survey, and in most of these surveys, employees are not always willing to release information because they are afraid that, okay, if I release this information, it's going to come after me. But when CEOs allows people to hear their views, dialogue, construct criticism, it will also help. Also, part of it which we mentioned is the process consultations. Our processes are not optimal. Our processes are suboptimal. They are not supporting the reality or the post-COVID organization. CEOs must also allow and give due approval to allow due process to be carried out by validating whether what they have is valid and reliable. And also the issue of training. Well, even though many people think that training is only the interventions we have, I thank Rally for bringing this up, that training is just one of the interventions. It's not all the interventions. And training, even from experience, you could only implement 10% of what is learned at a time. So you don't go for training until that upon coming back from the training, everything learned in that training will be implemented. No. So ECOs should also open room for learning by ensuring that the employees, their leaders, their executives also are enrolled in various learning programs that can help them to widen their skills and exposures. And then
I will hold you there. I will hold you there. I will hold you there, Dr. Doughton. Thank you so much. Because of our time, we can't extend this further. But interesting discussion there, interesting points that you are raising, and most importantly, that CEOs need to be humble when they are working with their senior executives or their employees. And this brings us back to that understanding that we are humans. We need to move away from that scientific management thinking, where CEOs see themselves as mini gods in organizations. And when people see a CEO, they see someone who they can't easily approach. We still have that kind of CEOs in organizations. But the participatory approaches that we want needs us to have CEOs who are humble, CEOs who are willing to learn, and who values diverse perspectives that people can bring. One question that is normally asked by people is, what is the difference, or is there a difference between organization development and organizational development as we bring these issues together. And I will confirm that there is a lot of debates around whether organization development is a part of human resource management or it's a standalone field in terms of how it operates. Looking at organization development, from the word organization, this is where I am bringing in the whole system thinking, where we need to have organization-wide thinking in terms of how can we move organizations forward, and then bringing in the behavioral science approach. Organizational development focuses on developing people. And when we talk of much of our organizational leadership discussions, we are talking of developing people. That's what I indicated earlier to say, if we attend leadership trainings, most of these trainings focus on leadership styles, leadership theories, and leadership skills. And we spend 2-3 hours discussing about a leader has to be creative, a leader has to be humble, a leader has to be honest, a leader has to have integrity. And then we ignore the issues that Ms. Maureen indicated earlier, complexity and chaos in organizations. Organizations are always in a state of disorganization. We will never reach a time where our organizations are in perfect alignment in terms of their systems, in terms of their structures, in terms of their processes. So when we go into a brainstorming session or in a meeting and we agree on something, the moment that we are going out of that meeting, the organization is shifting. So much such that when the secretary finishes typing out the minutes and distributing the minutes, all those things might not work because things have changed. So the pace of change today require us to have that organization-wide thinking and integrating the internal and the external environment in ways that will help us to move forward. So organization development, as it supports leadership, brings that whole system thinking. And if you look at the job descriptions that are in the screen now, the titles are almost the same. But one is about organization development. The other one is about organizational development. And if you look at the organization development job description, it speaks into systems, it speaks into processes, it speaks into rewards, and looking at the organization as a whole. If we look at the organizational development job description, it's more into people and development, learning and development, human resource aspects, where we are developing people. So in organizations, we need to integrate these two and have a whole system thinking perspective, where we see an organization as a system and bring that system into alignment. And we also have a misconception in terms of organization development is about change. And when organization development was introduced, it was focusing more on improvement and growth. And when we look at growth, we are looking at growth in terms of expansion of the business. We're looking at growth in terms of transformation of the business. We're looking at growth in terms of change management in that particular organization. But in most instances, we talk of growth in the context of expansion. And we say our businesses are growing. We have opened a new branch in a new location, or we have so much employees in our organization. But what we are now looking at in terms of organization development is the focus on improvement and bringing in the leadership aspect, integrating or mixing it up with organization development in order to drive growth. And organization development is about creating great teams and great organizations. And this was a result of the weaknesses of the leadership and management approaches that were being used prior to the introduction of organization development. So as I've indicated earlier, in order to make sense of the fusion of manifestations in organizational leadership and organization leadership, it is important to understand current practices in terms of how they have developed in historical context. If we get to understand where we are coming from in terms of these particular concepts, it helps us to then devise sustainable solutions today. So when we have people in leadership positions, they need to understand the fundamental principles in leadership and then apply those fundamental principles in context of their organizations. If I'm working in Econet Wireless, the way I apply organization leadership and organization development is different from when I'm working in an SME sector. So we need to have that contextual intelligence that comes with appreciative intelligence. And appreciative intelligence takes us back to appreciative inquiry, where we need to inquire and engage, understand context, and then implement interventions that needs to be implemented. So what we see today in the way organizations are being led and organization development is being practiced links back to some original core principles. And are we aware of those original core principles? And to what extent do we promote those original core principles in terms of how we lead organizations? If I go into ALMA and I'm leading ALMA today, Dr. Justine is asked to be part of ALMA immediately, I need to fine tune myself from the way I'm leading in Business Professionals Education Center in Abu Dhabi to the way I will lead ALMA in Zimbabwe. These are the same, we are doing the same business, but the way I lead in Abu Dhabi is different from the way I have to lead in ALMA. So there are certain core principles that we need to apply in context of the organizations that we have. So we see the organization development field is expanding in terms of its boundaries and blossoms. We see leadership is expanding in terms of its boundaries and blossoms. We see a lot of leadership models every other week. If you are involved in research, you see someone is developing a model about leadership. And it's becoming confusing in terms of what exactly are some of the fundamentals that we need to take and use in organizations. And this brings us back to say, let's go back to the early beginnings of these particular fields and how things came into being. So leadership and organization development, the core concepts are that we need top management support and commitment. Are our leaders, are our CEOs committed to growth and development? What are the structures that we are putting in place to ensure organization alignment? And remember, we are not going to have any instance where we say our organization is perfectly aligned, because an organization is in a constant state of disorganization. An organization is unordered. An organization is disorganized. And that's where the chaos theories come in. And this is where complexity theories come in. How then do we organize an ordered, a disorganized structure? And we need to have the 8 interventions that Raila has presented, and we need to deliberate on these issues so that we ensure that we maintain this unordered and disorganized structure we call an organization. There should be flexibility and customized strategies. That's why we need to have constant brainstorming sessions. We need support from both the internal and external stakeholders. It's time where we need to have brainstorming sessions that go beyond our organizations, to have meetings or conversations with our customers, with our suppliers, and see how we can work for sustainable results. But in most organizations, we are still led by this competitive mindset where we want to be better than the other. Today, in most circles, we see a lot of awards, corporate awards. And some of these awards are just nothing but pieces of paper and plaques that we get, and you are told your organization is the best organization in this particular industry. On what basis? On the basis probably of the connections that we have. We have seen a lot of certification today to organizations, to individuals, most of which have no value, have no grounding in terms of why we are getting these to our organizations. And we see that in newspapers, in social media, and organizations following suit in terms of social media facilitation. We need employee involvement, feedback, and dialogue, and creating trust in our organizations. But to what extent do we have our organizations involving employees in matters that are pertinent to building great teams and great organizations? When people are going for strategy meetings, only those who are considered themselves as the executives with red ties, shiny shoes, and striped suits are the ones that go to that meeting. And those who are involved in the issues, the particularities of the organization are nowhere to be found. They don't even know what is discussed in those particular strategy meetings. And when these guys come back with their shiny shoes and red ties and they try to implement and just enforce whatever was discussed on employees. And if you go to the company corridors, you hear the right issues where people speak into the real issues that are happening in organizations. So for us to be effective in organizational leadership and development, we need to have some of these core concepts integrated in the way we run our organizations. So just briefly, I've indicated that organization development was introduced around at the end of the World War II, that is in the 1940s. And if we look at the transition in terms of leadership and management, from a management point of view, we had moved from scientific management, 1856 to 1915. We had Weber with the bureaucratic management, 1864 to 1920. We had Henry Fayol with his 14 principles up until 1925. These are the ways that organizations were being managed. From a leadership point of view, that was the time when we were at the trade theory period, where leaders had certain traits and characteristics. For you to become a leader, you need to have certain traits and characteristics. But at that time, that's when organization development was introduced. Why? In order to complement the leadership and management practices that were in organizations. And the people who were introducing the organization development field didn't know what was happening in organizations. And then they said, let's inquire and engage. So if you look at what then happened, from the 1930s, we started having the behavioral theories where people started valuing humanitarian values, social values, and democratic values in organizations. And these fields started to be blended together. We started having a lot of executive coaching programs, leadership trainings, coaching and mentorship. All these terms started to happen after World War II. Why? Because we had this field which was being integrated to support leadership. And we see a lot of transitions that have happened until today, where we have new age theories and a lot of manifestations coming into play with regards to leadership and with regards to management. So what are the early beginnings? The early beginnings of leadership says leaders are born and they are not meant. That was the early beginning of leadership. In terms of management, they said people are machines. That was what Henry Fayol was advocating for. And we had Elton Myers coming in around the 1930s when they introduced human resource management. And today we have people saying, no, we need human capital. People are not resources. And the arguments are still going on. So understanding these early beginnings puts us in a position where we'll be able to understand where we are today, the many manifestations we see today, the blending and mixing that we are seeing in organizational leadership and development started during the World War, at the end of the World War II, as a way of addressing some of the issues that were happening in leadership and the issues that were happening in management. And we had organizations being run in these ways as shown in these factory scenes, and organization development was saying, let's chip in to address these issues and ensure continuous improvement. It was not about change, but rather about continuous improvement. It was about growth in totality, growth in terms of expansion, and today we see expansion that goes across borders. It was about growth in terms of transformation of the way things are done. And this was the telecommunications industry in the corner there. And what we see today, we are having a class today, a discussion through a virtual platform. These are the growth, the transformation, and the developments that came in as a result of the integration of concepts between leadership and integration of concepts in management. But we see in organizations today, not only the COVID-19 virus, but we also have these viruses that are pulling down organizations. The virus of hyper-specialization from Taylor. We have the virus of Fayolism, where we have split between design and execution. We have the virus that comes from Weberism, where we are still focusing more on policies and procedures. But the environment is saying we now have the millennial workers. The environment is now saying we have the gig economy. The environment is saying there is artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution. Yet some of our organizations are still under attack from the Taylor, Fiolism, and Weberism virus. So as we fight the COVID-19 virus, we need also to have the grounding in looking back to the TFW virus. It's fortunate enough that COVID-19 forced organizations to re-look at their structures. Most organizations, though technology was being talked about, most organizations were reluctant to have people working from home. But overnight, the COVID-19 did cast a shadow on people working in offices, and every organization said, you can work from home. So the TFW virus needs to be attended to in our conversations in organizations. As we do training and development or learning and development, we need to also emphasize that we need contextual intelligence that comes with appreciative intelligence. And this is where the integration of these particular fields then come into play. And as I prepare to land, we need to understand that the more a system is developed, the more it is aware of itself, it can talk to itself, and it can talk about itself. So how developed are our systems? We look at our organization. If our organization is developed, it is aware of itself, it can talk to itself, and it can talk about itself. And this is where the issue of self-renewal, organizations renewing themselves, adaptability, adaptive leadership, and all those particular concepts comes into understanding that the more the system developed, it can then talk about itself and it is aware of itself. It is not driven by reactive and conscious emotions or motivations, but it is based on that inquiry and engagement. So organizations continually evolve, and we need to understand that evolution and the different interventions that we can put in these organizations at any given point in time. One question that we need to ponder ourselves as we reflect on this particular subject is, does man exist for the benefit of organizations such as industry, the state, or the market? Or do organizations exist for the benefit of men? For us to be able to understand the soul of organization development, when we answer this question, does men exist to benefit organizations, or organizations exist to benefit men? We get to understand how we need to lead organizations. We get to understand how we need to put certain interventions into place. When we look at the heart of leadership, it is said that the heart of leadership is that issue of emotional intelligence. And we have a lot of training sessions that speaks into emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-regulation, and leaders being trained into emotional intelligence. So we have the soul of organization development, which says organizations exist for the benefit of men. And we have the heart of leadership, which says we have to be emotionally intelligent. And if we are emotionally intelligent, we start valuing others, and we start leading in a way that is unique and that is transformational in the way organizations should be run. I will not talk about the evolutions that we have seen in terms of organization development from the first generation organization development when OD was being introduced, and it was focusing on identifying and quantifying problems, to what we see today in organization development, where we need to search out, highlight, and amplify what is working in organizations. So rather than having conversations about what is going wrong in our organizations and spending 80% of our time addressing problems, let's spend 80% of our time working on what is working, highlighting what is working, amplifying what is working. My wife is living in Zimbabwe. If she sends me messages about problems, she knows it's going to be a problem. But if she sends me a message about a solution, to say, no, our son is not feeling well, I'm actually on my way to the hospital and I will update you later. That message has a different effect than when she sent me a message to say, oh, your son is not feeling well and we are in the house. So in organizations, we need to amplify what is working and convert or change the 80-20 rule, which says focus on problems and then solutions. And then we say 80% of our time should be on searching out, highlighting, and amplifying what is working rather than focusing on problems. I will end with this slide because of our time in terms of the need for organization development and the need for integrating of these two concepts. We live in a VUCA environment. Things are changing so fast, and in certain instances, we will not be able to control the pace of change. And as such, we need to integrate leadership. We need to integrate organization development with the primary reason to build great teams and great organizations. So we need to reflect on our organizations internal. We also need to reflect on our organizations as they relate with the environment external and build sustainable solutions. It's high time where we need to have CEOs and organizational leaders sitting to discuss styles of leadership, theories of leadership, and the approaches to leadership, but rather we need more conversations around the practice of leadership, because it seems the way we are teaching leadership contradicts the way leadership is being practiced. The more we talk about leadership, the more we see failures in corporate leadership. And the more the people who are talking about leadership, like what Dr. Justine is doing now, the more we hear about Dr. Justine faltering. So we need to investigate these particular issues and see how we can build great teams and great organizations. Thank you. Because of time, I'll give it to Dr. Chichetu for the questions and to see how.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Justine. Indeed, it seems our time is running out. Just a quick one from one of our ALMA students. Can you please briefly speak into the utility of organizational leadership and development in the public sector?
Thank you. Mr. Hassan Tawakkoli is here, and he's working with the Afghanistan Ministry of Justice, and he's involved in organization development in the Afghanistan Ministry of Justice Service sector there. The principles of organization development applies to both the private and public sector in equally the same way. What is important is the top management support or the executive support, which in most public sectors, it's a challenge to get. But we have seen the application of organization development in South Africa, the time of apartheid. Organization development played a significant role in South Africa towards the end of apartheid, where people got together and had conversations about how to stop this demise. In Zimbabwe, we have the Pollard now, this political parties group. Though we politicize conversations around it, it's part of organization development, where the political parties in Zimbabwe said, let's have a radical circle and start having conversations. Conversations about how we can move forward as a nation. And this is the application of OD from a public sector perspective. What then is needed in terms of looking at it from a Pollard point of view are some of the interventions that will support that particular issue. So organization development applies in all organizations, the private and the public sector, in equally the same way. As long as there is top management support and we start doing the inquiry and engagement, I think you can go back to the issue of how the Constitution of Zimbabwe was actually developed, the current Constitution. There were a lot of conversations, people were engaged, and at the end, everybody was happy with the outcome of that Constitution.
Thank you, Doc. Maybe in 30 seconds, how best do we implement OD practice in young and small businesses?
In young and small businesses, I will share the slides of an example, 3 examples where OD was applied. And just moving to that slide, one is the e-services sector in Ghana, where they applied these particular concepts and people were engaged. We had a number of brainstorming sessions from the e-services organization in Ghana. We also have the issue that was touched by Raila, in terms of Ghana, the High Commission, British High Commission. These are some of the case studies that we can look at. This is in the Gambia. We can also look at how OD is being applied in Rwanda, as Rwanda is becoming one of the attractive areas in Africa, and they are running their government more like a business, which is the application of OD in Rwanda. So there are certain case studies that you will see in the slides that Dr. Chichetu will share. I think you have to give your emails to Dr. Chichetu, and he will be sharing the slides and handouts for this particular discussion. Yes, we can extend Dr. Chichetu for 10 minutes.
Great. Yes. We have another question from Akinse Gabriel. How do you redirect leaders of an organization with a typical African culture of I am older and more experienced?
All right. There's the issue. I was supposed to talk about the Malawi proverbs, the proverbs that we see in Malawi. And one of their proverbs speaks into that the older you get, the more knowledge you have. And the issue now is, how do we get inquiry and engagement? If we see issues of appreciative inquiry, for us to have the discussion of appreciative inquiry, one of its roots is in Africa, because the African culture itself values inquiry and engagement. If we go back to our villages, the people there don't have that mindset that says, because I am old, I will not engage. That mentality came as a result of westernization and the competitiveness and acquisitiveness of our leaders, who then say, because I am old, I know everything. But it's not part of the African culture. The African culture engages, and it emphasizes you engage with respect. If you're talking to your elders, there's a way that you need to talk to them, and which is fundamental everywhere. But we have that mindset now in organizations where we are trying to maneuver through and say, if I am a leader, you can't question what I say. This is just a matter of competitiveness and an acquisitive mindset in our leaders, which needs to be corrected by having more discussions on followership rather than focusing more on leadership. If followers understand how to deal with those kind of leaders, we'll be able to address that issue, I believe.
Yes, thank you. And maybe just to comment on that as well, going back to the remarks by Dr. Dotam, where you spoke of CEOs needing to submit to learning, as the question is referring to African culture. So if we are going to see this shift, then there's a need for us even to change the culture. We need to also begin to inform the culture. And to do that, those in leadership would need to be willing to learn. But then it also poses a challenge when you are, the context in which the question has been asked, this is someone who is in the subordinate role. Mm-hmm. How then do you redirect the leaders? So maybe in that same vein, I would say if you're in the subordinate role, you also need to create learning opportunities for the leader. So the leaders—
I'll give an example.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. I will speak about Mr. Kwanele Ngwenya, who was the CEO of Stewart Bank when I was working in Stewart Bank some years back. I'll speak about him because he's a close friend.
Yes.
I was a subordinate. I was a treasury back office supervisor that time. And I had no reach to him as the CEO. And me being just a mere supervisor and approaching a CEO was something that was wild in that organization. But I initiated an email to Mr. Ngwenya and said, I want to develop as a person in terms of organizational leadership and development, and I want to have conversations with you. All I want is for me to be writing to you every Monday morning about what I think about Stewart Bank and how Stewart Bank can move forward. And he accepted that. And I used to write emails to Mr. Ngwenya every Monday morning. I would go to office every Sunday to draft that email and ensure that it's professional enough. I was not yet at that level where I could write professional emails. So I would sit, write an email and send to Mr. Ngwenya, who was the CEO. And he started adopting some of those things to such an extent that he invited me for coffee at one point. And from there onwards until today, he is a close friend, and I can freely share this particular name now. So it's depends from the perspective, the position you are in, and how we approach our leaders. In most instances, the way we approach these leaders is in a way that is attacking the leaders. I indicated that when OD was being introduced, it was a direct attack on leadership, because the people who were introducing OD were saying leaders are not doing the right thing. And leaders, initially, they resisted until they then get to a point where they said, let's inquire and engage. So there should be a way in which, based on the culture of that organization, we approach people. And I think every leader has a listening eye, but it depends with how we listen to them.
Wow, that was wisdom there, how you approached him, because you made the focus of engagement yourself and not him. And initially was open to that. And from there, you were then able to create this platform where you can engage about other issues that actually pertain to him as well as a leader. So yeah, indeed, it takes wisdom. Mr. Chundu, I can see your hand has been up.
Thank you. Just my last remarks on the subject. I'm still looking at the apex leader, the ultimate leader in the organization. Yes, there was a slide that talked about implementation. We didn't talk much about it earlier. But when all is done, the engagement and the inquiry, we need to understand that it is a means to an end, not the end in itself. At the end of the day, the leader must be able to take responsibility for the future and the health of the organization, and use the outcome of engagement and inquiry to take the organization to the next level. That involves making decisions and being able to live with the consequences. I see a danger where this collaboration and over-consultation is being overplayed to the point the leader is running away from his duties or her duties, which is to lead. When all is done, at the end of the day, I've seen organizations that I've consulted on change. Problems comes down to no one is making decisions in that organization. It gets unit leaders frustrated because they are not moving. Politically, I think you mentioned the issue of blood and all this. The same issues. Having consulted, for what? How do we process the information coming from line managers and be able to take the organization forward? Additionally, we had this, and I think we are losing it. If you look at the concept of diary, how our monarchs were run, at the end of the day, it was the chief or the king who had the responsibility to take the thing forward. I think we've been losing this over time. So I just thought we needed to emphasize that, because there's this thing in politics that says we are good at coming up with documents, but we are weak at implementation. When I say are weak at implementation, basically saying you are weak in leadership. No one is taking the consultative output to take the organizations forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yes, Doc.
Yes, let me give opportunity. Anyone else? Any other comment, question? ALMA students? Please, can you indicate by raising your hand? Anyone with a question, a comment? Doc, I think we are good. Maybe some closing remarks.
Oh, there's a hand from Dr. Stolle.
Oh, yes. Dr. Stolle. Dr. Stolle?
I'm mute. Okay, hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Great. Thank you once again. I just want to add the aspect of decision making. That when, just like what Mr. Chunde said, that when all that is done, inquiry, engagement, and everything, at the point of making a decision, my contribution is that we need to strengthen evidence-based decision-making, evidence-based policy-making, which means that in the inquiry process, there is need for a thorough data analysis, whether it is quantitative or qualitative, to be able to inform the decisions that we make. And this is fundamental in the whole equation of organizational leadership and development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stolle. Indeed, we need to begin to move towards research-based solutions rather than what we've been seeing as the trend where we go with popularism. What is it that the masses are wanting? What is it that they are clamoring for? And we then prescribe that as the solution to some of our challenges. Thank you.
Yeah,
if I can
gut
see
feelings.
No feelings in decision making.
Yeah, gut feelings, they shouldn't work. They don't work. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Wimbai?
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc Justine, and everyone else who has been part of this panel. I must say, for me, this has been very eye-opening, especially from a leadership perspective. I've really been challenged as well. And I think, Doc, you highlighted that there will be more of such sessions. I would appreciate that and to be actively participating because this has really been helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Wimbai, for that feedback. We really appreciate that. Any more comments, questions? Maybe just give opportunity to Hassan. Hassan has been quiet. Hassan?
Yes.
Hello, yes,
Actually,
comments from Afghanistan, say.
Actually, I'm new with this Saudi and I'm learning this. For the next session, I'll be prepared and then I will ask some question. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes, we do hope you will continue to join. We'd want also to benefit from that perspective from Afghanistan, given the differences in the context, yours and ours here in Africa. So we'd really look forward to your continued participation.
Sure, next time, inshallah.
Okay, I want to thank you. I don't know, it's really interesting. It's really a whole lot of eye opener, and I want to believe that my team here from Nigeria also have gained a whole lot. And I want to assure you that subsequent one, I would like to drag in as many CEOs in particular to participate. If I knew that this was going to be so much like this, I would have wanted so many CEOs to participate because there is a whole lot to learn and also top executives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dotam, for the feedback. That's very encouraging. Dr. Justine.
Yes.
Closing remarks from you, sir.
Thank you so much, ALMA. It's a great opportunity to engage in conversations. I am deeply rooted in OD, so much such that everything I talk is more into OD. The 4 pillars that we rely on is that of action research, action inquiry, as Dr. Stolle have indicated. We are also embedded in whole system thinking, where we need to think in terms of a system, not just our unit. Also organization learning. I was expecting Kurai to be here and maybe she was going to share a little bit about organizational learning. And lastly is the issue of the behavioral science, which focuses on humanitarian values, social values, and democratic values in the way we relate and interact with things. And we also need to revisit the way we teach or discuss leadership relative to the way leadership is actually practiced, because there seems to be a gap between what is taught in leadership and what actually happens when people get into leadership positions. And it's interesting, just like Dr. Dotadev said, getting those people who are into leadership roles to share, because we rarely see CEOs making presentations about leadership. We rarely see most of those, especially from an African context, CEOs being engaged and having a CEO coming to ALMA and integrating theory with practice. So we need to have more of these leaders, corporate leaders, engaging with us as scholars or educational institutions, so as to promulgate sustainable solutions to address the leadership challenge. In Africa, from an ALMA perspective, we have placed leadership as the #1 challenge in Africa. And something needs to be done with respect to closing that theory practice gap and ensure that we can build sustainable organizations. I think it's time that we lower down a little bit our talk on leadership and leadership and leadership everywhere and actually practice leadership. So once again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to get into this conversation. I must appreciate my colleague, Mr. Hassan Tawakoli in Afghanistan, my colleague Raila, my mentee and her group from Philippines, Dr. Dotan and the group from Nigeria, and everyone else. Thank you so much for gracing this ALMA series. And we look forward to Dr. Chichetu and Mr. Chundu to have more of these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Justine Chinoperekweyi. I think this was a really informative session, quite challenging, thought-provoking. Like you said in the closing remarks, it's about time we started practicing leadership rather than just talking about it. So thank you for that. And indeed, we will be having such sessions every 2 weeks. So we'll be advertising on our Facebook, the ALMA Facebook page. You can look us up on Facebook, Africa Leadership and Management Academy, ALMA. We'll also be using Dr. Justine as a friend and an associate to ALMA as well. We'll also be using his platform and his network for advertising similar sessions for the future. So please do take note of that. The next one will be in 2 weeks' time. So we do hope you'll be able to join us and to get to invite more. The more we are, the more we can we increase the learning opportunity from the different participants from all over. Thank you very much once again, Dr. Justine. Thank you, Dr. Dotam, joining us from Nigeria. Madame Maureen, thank you as well. Hassan, thank you very much. And also to Ria for that presentation. Raila, yes, thank you, Raila from the Philippines. Thank you for that as well. And to everyone who has been a part of this session, we really do appreciate your participation and the comments. We have noted them down. Please, let's continue to engage even beyond this platform within your respective networks. Let's continue to engage. Take what have been discussed in here to your respective platforms and initiate engagement and such conversations as well. For the slides, as Dr. Justine has highlighted, we will be circulating them. So you can drop me your email address. Either you can do it now in the chat room, or you can go back to the invitation. My email address is there on the invitation for this webinar. You can then send me your email address and we can share with you all the material that was used in the presentation this morning.
I will share the link as well for the recording. This session was being recorded, so I will send you the link as well.
Wonderful. Yes, Dr. Dotam, a closing prayer from you, say. You kicked that stuff with a word from Nehemiah. Now a word of prayer, please. Sorry, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege. We appreciate you for this timely gesture. We want to bless you for the organizer, the ALMA, and Dr. Chichetu, as well as Dr. Justine, and everyone here present from far and near, from Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Filipino, Afghanistan, South Africa, United States, and other places. We appreciate for this collaboration, which has given us a better insight and exposure. And we pray, Lord, for more grace, more strength, more energy, and more resources to be able to champion this and impact Africa and the globe as a whole. We thank you for our prayer, Lord. In Jesus' name we have prayed. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Dotam. Thank you, everyone. Be blessed and let's stay safe.